Hey everyone, it's Colin. How's it going? Recently I pulled my original PlayStation 2 out of storage and quickly realized that it's not working right. It doesn't want to read discs. You can put a disc in and it'll spin, but it'll never actually load the game. So I figured, you know what, let's crack it open and see if we can fix it. First, of course, you're going to want to peel the warranty sticker off. This thing probably hasn't been valid for a decade or so anyway. No point in continuing to have it, it's just going to impede our progress. Thankfully, taking apart one of these original or fat PlayStation 2s is very straightforward. It's just a few screws around the bottom. They are covered by these little rubber or plastic caps, and I like to use a plastic spudger in order to pry them out without risking damage to them. Just get under one side and pop them out. Then it's a simple matter of using a Phillips head screwdriver to take the screws out from around the perimeter. Do note that some of them are significantly longer than others, so try to keep track of which screws came out of which location. After that, simply flip the PlayStation 2 over and lift the top off, but don't pull it away completely. You'll find that the button assembly on the right side is still attached, and we actually want to remove that assembly from the top cover instead of disconnecting any cables. The reason is we're going to need those buttons still hooked up during the process of troubleshooting and repairing the console. So if you simply grab hold of that assembly from the inside of the top case, you can kind of lever it out and still leave the ribbon cable connected. After that, we're going to need to remove the top cover from the DVD drive. It's 4 small Phillips head screws around the perimeter, and then the top plastic cover lifts off. To make things easier with troubleshooting, we're going to need to remove this little white plastic disc retainer from that top cover. If you slide it to one side and very carefully bend it, you can get it to pop out. How this thing works is that it's got a magnet in the middle of it, and it holds the top of the disc against the spindle while the disc is turning. So this way we don't need to put the top of the PS2 or even the top of the drive back on the console while we're troubleshooting and adjusting some of the things we need to adjust. It just makes troubleshooting a lot faster. So at this point, we're going to want to be very careful working inside the PS2 because we do need to plug it in, and these original fat PlayStation 2s have built-in power supplies. So that means you are going to be working kind of near mains voltage. Thankfully, that power supply is buried under the motherboard, so it's not terribly exposed, but do be careful regardless. The first thing we want to do is see if the laser carriage even moves. The easiest way that I've found to do this is to manually slide it all the way to one end, usually the farthest out reach of the disc. Put a disc in, turn the console on, and let it do its thing. Chances are it's not going to read the disc, but it should hopefully move that laser carriage. In my case, it did. I have no problems with that laser moving back and forth across the disk. There's something optically or electrically going on with actually getting the data off the disk. So that means we have to continue on a little bit more. The next troubleshooting step to try is to clean the laser lens. I like to take a cotton swab, soak it in isopropyl alcohol, and then very gently wipe down the surface of the lens. After that, give it a few seconds for the alcohol to dry, then try reading a disc again. In my case, this didn't work, so let's keep going. Now, there is a small adjustment wheel at the back of the drive that oftentimes can help dial in settings and get the laser tracking correctly. This is probably the easiest adjustment you can make on this drive, and all it requires is just a small hex bit in order to turn it. Take note of the position of the hole in the wheel relative to that pin that locks into the teeth of the gears. That was set that way at the factory because that's the way it worked best at the factory. If all else fails, we'll need to return that wheel back to that position before we continue on with troubleshooting. At this point, you can use that hex bit to turn that gear 2 teeth at a time and repeat with your troubleshooting. Put a disc in, turn the console on, see if it reads. If you notice the drive starting to make a lot of grinding or struggling noises, chances are you've taken it too far out of alignment for it to work properly, so you need to back off some more. You can also try turning that gear counterclockwise to see if an adjustment in that direction helps. Maybe take that gear 3, 4, 5 teeth prior to where it was set from the factory and see if the noise of the drive changes, if it has any better luck reading a disk. In my case, no amount of adjustment of that gear helped. There's something else going on, so I put it back to the way it was from the factory and moved on. So with that gear not helping anything, we need to get a little bit deeper into the drive. And this is the point where you need to make a decision as to whether it's going to be worth your time. Unfortunately, the likelihood of repair going farther than this diminishes greatly. We're going to be adjusting the laser itself. And this laser assembly is quite a bit different than the one in the GameCube because it actually is able to read both CDs and DVDs. It's not just a purpose-built drive for reading one type of disc. Remember, the PlayStation 2 was meant to be as much a DVD and media player as it was a game console, so the drive itself is a bit more complicated. Unscrew the 4 Phillips head screws that hold the laser carriage assembly in place. The 2 at the back of the console are different than the 2 at the front. At this point, you can very gently kind of lift up that laser carriage, and with a fingernail, reach behind and unlatch the bail that holds the laser ribbon cable in place. The bail is that little plastic locking tab. You need to pop out either side of it. It'll maybe move a couple of millimeters at the very most. That bail won't come out completely. But once it's loose, then you can very gently pull that ribbon cable out. With the ribbon cable disconnected, then you can take that entire laser carriage and kind of hinge it up to the right, such that you can get at the bottom of the laser carriage, but you still don't have to disconnect the other 2 ribbon cables that are holding it to the rest of the drive. As we're going through this, you're going to need to take this apart and put it back together a couple of times because there's going to be some tweaking involved. And what you're going to be tweaking are these potentiometers on the underside of the laser itself. If you look on the left side, that potentiometer is for the CD laser, and the potentiometer on the right side is for the DVD laser. These drives actually have 2 lasers underneath that laser lens. In my case, it's the DVD laser that's not working right because it can't read DVD-based games. Now, much like when I did the GameCube repair, we need to adjust that potentiometer in order to kind of change the power of the laser, basically give it a little bit more juice. The laser diode ages and maybe it gets a bit weaker. It has trouble reading the information on the disc. Now, this potentiometer is very touchy. You can't give it a big full turn and expect to, be able to dial it in very well. At the very most, you want to maybe turn it a 1/16 of a turn, a very small amount. And here's how you can tell how you're dialing it in. I used a multimeter to check the ohms across this potentiometer. As you can see, I'm in the upper 1100s with the way it was set from the factory. But with just a very slight turn of that potentiometer clockwise, we've suddenly decreased the ohms down to about 1,000. And the thing is, you don't really want to go any below 850 ohms on that potentiometer because you're going to be giving the laser way too much power at that point. So I set it to 1,000 ohms, buttoned it up, tried a disc, and unfortunately it still didn't work. And this is kind of the tedious part about trying to repair laser assemblies in game consoles, is that they're very fiddly. So in your case, you're going to need to take it apart, tweak it again, put it back together. Sometimes too much power is not appropriate for getting it to read a disc. Sometimes you need to back it off a little bit. There's a lot of trial and error in there, so just set aside some time to go through the process, try and dial it in. Once you've got it dialed in and it's working great, assembly is really pretty much just the reverse of disassembly. Put it all back together, test it out one last time before you put the cover on, make sure that it works, and then put the screws in and off you go. Now, in my case, no amount of tweaking in the world was able to get my console working. I'm pretty sure it's just because I had a bad laser. Thankfully, the PS2 is a very common console and there are a lot of replacement parts out there on the market. So I'm probably just going to pick up a new laser assembly, drop it in, and call it done. If that's too much work for you, if you do that initial tweaking of the tracking and that doesn't fix it and you don't really want to go any further, well, maybe another option for you is to just go buy another whole PS2. They're pretty inexpensive these days as well. But in any event, hopefully this helped you out. If you like the video, I'd appreciate a thumbs up. If you haven't already, please subscribe. I really appreciate it. And as always, thanks for watching.